hopefully the last part of this photo retouch video that we have to do this evening is has to do with increasing the contrast throughout the entire image. Now, you can go crazy with this just like any other part of retouching, but you really want to make some subtle edits. Increasing the contrast just basically means that where there's light, you want to kind of bump those up, and where there's dark, you want to bump those up too, so that the difference between black and white or dark and light are going to be increased, and it just makes an overall crisper look on your photograph. Okay, to get right into what we're going to do here, we're basically going to do two separate things for contrasting. We're going to do contouring on the face, and then we're also going to do some actual contouring or bump up the contrast in her hair. All right, to do that, we're going to go ahead and do what we did earlier, is that we're going to bring all of the edits that we have up to a new layer by itself. And we do that by going Control-Alt-Shift-E. Okay, I always joke and say you just ball your fist up and hit the left side of your keyboard, but just get all of those in a row, and it'll work for you. So what we're working on now is this layer here that is the sum of all the other layers below it. All right. So above that, when we want to make a blank layer, and this is going to be a special type of layer. This layer is actually going to be 50% gray, and there's a lot of technical information that will go into that, but really at this point you just need to know that it is a 50% gray, which means if I were to paint on this layer with white, then those areas are going to be lightened, and if I were to paint on it with black, they're going to be darkened. So what we'll do is, again, we're going to hold Alt on the keyboard, and then we will create a new mask or a new layer down here at the bottom. When I do that, you're going to see this dialog box come up. And on this dialog box, the things that you really need to be concerned with is the mode and this blank after that will actually light up after you pick the mode. The mode that we use is going to be overlay. Okay, so overlay will allow us to make this blank here fill with overlay neutral gray, 50% gray. We need to check that, and then it's going to create, when I say OK, another layer up here above our current layer, and it just has gray in the in the little thumbnail icon there. Your picture doesn't look any different, but what you're going to find is that when you paint with, like I said earlier, with black, it's going to darken those areas, and when you paint with white, it's going to lighten areas. Now again, this is where you really want to be subtle with your edits, because you'll get something really freaky looking if you don't. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make sure that my opacity here is down to like, oh, maybe 5 to 6, maybe no more than 10%. Okay, I'm going to put it at 10%. And now I'm going to go ahead and switch on my keyboard to lighten, or actually the white. So in this case, I have to push X to make white my foreground color, and use my brush. And what I'm looking for is these areas inside of here. These are areas that are light in her hair. You see these areas that have little highlights. Basically all I want to do is go in there and bump up those highlights. So I'm just going to go in here and just subtle, and it's, you know, so kind of hard to see sometimes, but you really want to just make very little edits here. Now you probably won't see much until I go here and turn that layer off and on. You can see there's definitely a difference there. So I'm following these little areas that are naturally highlighted in her hair because of the lighting, or because maybe a highlight in her hair. Okay, I'm just going to go in there and quickly just go through some of those areas and just enhance some of that lighting. Okay, then I'm going to go and do the opposite, switch to black as my foreground color by pushing X, and then these dark areas, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm just going to go in and just kind of sculpt the light so that those areas that are dark have a little more punched up shadow. All right, and the result that we're going to get is increased contrast. All right, so I've made those. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn that layer off and on, and you'll see the difference. It really enhances her hair so that it looks like there's contrast in there. All right, I'm going to go ahead and make another layer just like that one, so that we can do some contouring on her face. And really, I'm only going to carry it as far as the contouring on her face. I'm not going to go into what I normally would, which are neck and chest area down here, where there will be some sculpting on maybe her shoulder blades and maybe her arms or whatever's exposed. And I'm not going to go through that, but you'll understand that you can do that depending on how much time you have to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and, like I said, ball up my fist and hit the left side of my keyboard. I'm going to push Control-Alt-Shift-E. That will bring everything, all my edits, to the top, just one layer. I want to hold Alt on my keyboard and have a new layer created. Go to my mode of overlay and then click the little box that says Fill Overlay with overlay neutral color, 50% gray, and say OK. So now I'm going to do the same thing to her face that I did to her hair, and I'm just looking for dark areas and light areas. I'm going to go in first and do a little of the dark areas first, and see I'm increasing my the size of my brush because I want these to be really subtle, and I'll even bring the opacity down because this is going to be really subtle. I'm going to go into areas like under her cheekbone here, and I'm going to make some little, I'm going to go back and actually get my, one more undo. All right, and I got to do a redo. All right, get those back down to there, and I'm going to bring the flow down because the flow is also going to see how much of this color that I'm going to put down at one time. So there we go. So now I've got a subtle look going on. So I'm finding areas under her chin here, her cheekbones, maybe her jaw here, that I'm going to actually just sculpt just in her eyes here, just right in the corners. That'll make her nose be a little more sculpted. We can go ahead and turn that off and on, and you can see just the very subtle things that I've done. Now I'm going to switch over to the white, and I'm going to hit all of those areas that are the highlights. And again, I just want to make some subtle things. You can overdo this part too because it'll start to look like she's sweating or something if you get too much. These are the most subtle edits that you want to do on retouching, but I'm following these areas here that already have highlights on them, already have a little bit of lighting, and I'm just punching those up a little bit. Alright, not going to go too far, so I'm going to turn that layer off and on so you can see the difference. Just a subtle thing. Alright, now I like to go in here with that layer selected and go up here to filter and then blur and then Gaussian blur, and what this is going to do is further go in and just make that the edit that I did just even that much more subtle because of the blur that I'm going to put on it. So I'm just going to find a layer there, and then I can see back and forth where that is blurred. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and say that we've done all that we want to do to this model for the retouch. I hope that you understand the procedure that we've gone through to do this retouch. I always like to, at the end, go ahead and hold Alt and look at my background. I can click the little eyeball on my background and I can see all of the edits and enhancements that I've made. Hopefully they've been subtle enough that she doesn't look too crazy. That's always a matter of taste, I've found. I'm going to back off a little bit here, and that's the after, and that's the before. There we go again.